Cops of Reddit, what's the most bullshit sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true? Not a cop, but heard it said to one EMS. Go to a woman who has been attacked by her cat. Her injuries were crazy, covered in blood, her scalp is literally shredded, huge lacerations etc. I know cats are known to do some damage, but the story wasn't fitting and she was so sketchy about anyone going in her house. Adamantly refuses to let anyone inside because she thinks they're going to take away her cat. He didn't mean to, he was just excited by the birds. Her cat was a lynx. Oh man, I used to work at a slightly sketchy grooming place and we had a lady bring her bobcat kitten in. She wanted us to socialize it more than bathe it, so we spent an hour every few weeks just handling it and trying to teach it that clawing us was bad. She eventually took it to Montana to get it declawed, and stopped coming shortly after that, so not sure what happened to her or the cat. Sucks that people want to try to keep wild animals greater than she eventually took it to Montana to get it declawed. Fuck these people. We've had a doozy of a day, officer. There we were minding our own business, making some improvements to our new vacation home, when all of a sudden these kids start killing themselves all over my property. Now, I don't know about how much experience you've had with this kind of thing, but me and Dale here, well, we ain't had any. Tucker, source https://uta.b/dquecarter4sar, t=14. I can't speak for the cop, but freshman year of college I was having a nice evening outside, drinking some soda and smoking a tobacco pipe with my 3 roommates, long-term friends I grew up with, when one went into the dorm. He called me a minute later and said, "Come back to the dorm, police are here and they are looking for you." I am on my way over and they see me and run up to me, in case I were to run. They ask my name and if I was here all night. I confirmed both my name and that I was at the dorm all evening. Apparently, another freshman guy my age, build, and height signed in under my name for an intramural flag football game, got into a tussle with an opposing team member, punched him and broke his jaw. He was last seen fleeing our direction. I'm sure my excuse sounded completely bogus, but it was the truth. What happened next after? It was pretty uneventful. He thought we were underage drinking, the sodas were in glass bottles, so we had to show them the labels. I don't think they ever caught the other guy. They didn't do anything to me after they realized I was telling the truth. Cop here, got a call of a domestic dispute that sounded very heated and a lot of banging was heard. Get to scene and I can hear someone yelling and swearing and brawling, doesn't sound good at all. Guy answers the door, shirt off and angry, but seems bewildered as to why police had been called. He told me he was building IKEA furniture, sounds like the most bullshit thing. But, we enter, see the new IKEA furniture half set up and no one else is home. Color me surprised, my dog ate my immigration papers. Not a cop, but here's a funny story where a cop heard a BS excuse that was true, and I'm fuzzy on the story, but here's what I remember. Once, a guy was driving with his infant and I forgot the reason, but a cop pulled him over. They searched his car and found a box of First Foods rice cereal, which, any parent of Reddit knows looks like cocaine. The cop thought it was actually cocaine stashed in a clever spot, so the guy was charged with possession. They didn't even bother checking. He then had them test the rice cereal, which came back negative for cocaine and any other drug it could have been mistaken for, and took that to court. If I'm correct, he's suing that police department or filing a suit against them for false charges. During a search of a person I pulled out a bag of a sticky dark substance consistent with heroin. The subject had multiple drug priors and is a known heavy heroin user. He immediately tells me it is burnt sugar and he is pissed someone sold it to him. Long story short, when I tested the substance it did not test positive for heroin. This explains the guy with the high blood glucose levels when he showed up for court, 2 MET or 2 FOST. Not a cop, but I have a pretty good one. In high school some of my buddies sold weed. Driving around in a car with a scale, baggies, and 2 to 4 ounces at any given time. One day T&D decided to go to a really good taco stand for lunch in between deliveries. E is driving. They're making their way downtown when E starts laughing. E, did you see that? T, no, what? E, I'll turn around, you gotta see this. T, dude, don't get us pulled over, WTF, chill. E makes a U-turn and turns down a street. Nothing there, so he stops in front of a random house to look around. T, WTF was it? Just drive. E, I just saw a dude pushing a stroller with two whiner dogs in it. T, you're retarded. As soon as he started driving again, a cop car pulls up behind them and lights them up. Cop 1, what are you guys doing? E, panicking a bit, I saw a guy pushing a stroller with whiner dogs in it and had to show my fry. Cop 2, how come you're parked in front of this known trap house and your car smells like dope? T, silence. E, this guy with the stroller and cops get out of the car. Car gets searched, they find all the shit. As they're getting loaded into the back of the cop car all handcuffed up, Cop 2 just stops. Cop 2, hey Cop 1, look at that. Cop 1, no shit. Everyone looks up at this old guy pushing a stroller with his two whiner dogs poking their heads out. Cops burst out laughing. They both got charged with possession/trafficking. Good times. I know a couple of people like he, and this makes me laugh because they always get into trouble doing stupid shit. Edit, quick story. Their last encounter was going to try and steal stuff from a big box store and had a change of heart halfway through. Grabbed a strawberry out of a container and walked right into a state trooper who saw it and detained them. They gave him attitude, so they were charged with petty larceny for $3.50. $120 bail apiece. Being laughed at for a week. Priceless. I got pulled over for driving to school at 10 a.m. The cop wanted to know why I was skipping school. I explained that our little town's girls basketball team just won state, and since the game was so far away they let us start that day at 10:30 a.m. He followed me all the way to the school so he could ask the principal. I still don't know what was illegal about driving to school at 10 a.m., but he was kind of a douche. Where do you live? North Korea? Hong Kong. Cops are never around when you need them. This feels like a club where all the guys are waiting for a girl to show up. As a psychologist, it's scary some of the stuff my male clients will say about dating apps and these kinds of environments. They're just playing a losing game. Honestly, you get to a certain point where it's better for everyone if I have them order a Japanese sex pillow to marry. Everyone's happier. You've certainly earned your username. Not a cop, but neither is anyone else here. When I was in university, I lived on campus for a year. One day a cop showed up at my door talking about me stealing checks. I hadn't stolen any checks and told the officer as much. She let out a big sigh and told me I needed to be honest with her before it got serious. Turns out another girl attending the same school qualified for the same grant I did and called the organization to request an update as she hadn't received her check yet. They said the check had been sent out weeks prior. I guess as part of the process to issue a new check, they checked to make sure the original hadn't been cashed. In this case it had. Into my bank account. Turns out the girl has the same first and last name as me and, for reasons unknown, but the school's address as hers, she didn't live on campus. So when a check I was expecting arrived to my address with my name on it, of course I cashed it. Took the officer a few minutes to work it all out in her head, but in the end I was not hauled off to jail for stealing a check. When my actual check arrived a few days later, I just gave the other girl the cash. Obligatory, not a cop. A friend of mine got stopped by a state trooper who spotted a baggie with some crumbly dark brown substance. He insisted it was pot. I don't think he ticketed her, since he knew where she lived, but he seized it for testing because he was sure it was pot. It was cat shit, just like she told him it was, since she was on her way to the vet. She didn't smoke weed, either, she was just a little free-spirited and he assumed. I'm running booking one night, guy gets brought in for possessing a truly stupendous amount of drugs. I'm talking like 2 Rubbermaid totes full of shrooms, a huge bag of weed, and enough heroin to overdose half the county. Well, says he, I'm a DA informant and they told me to make the drop so they could be there and raid the crap out of everybody and let me go for helping. Right. Face left please. Guy is like, I'm telling you dude, they're gonna be super pissed that you country retards fucked up their bust. Whatever, get in the holding cell and shut up. About 3 hours later 3 guys show up, DEA agents, they're super pissed that our deputies fucked up their bust. I go back to the holding cell to let the guy out, and he's just like, they're super pissed huh? Yeah. Told you so. That moment when you have 52 comments but only 2 are stories. Not sure how many cops use Reddit, but that seems to be fairly consistent with all the other direct AskReddit questions. They're all on r/or posting pictures of police dogs according to some people. I pulled someone over and his eyes were swollen like pink eye. So I thought he has weed in his system, but he said he was just crying because his cat died. Not believing him, but my shift just starting, I have him take me to his house in the squad car. When we pull up it smells like skunk and I see a giant tent in the backyard, and when we walk into the backyard I see a gravestone and it read in loving memory of Floofy. And I still don't know if that's the real reason his eyes were red and bloodshot or not, but I let him go. Oh number. I was driving with my fiance and we went through a roadblock where they checked registration and shit, and we get to the cops and they ask for our registration. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, so I open up the glove box and right there is a clear, unmarked baggie filled to the brim with catnip. I completely forgot it was there and just froze. I turned to look at the cop shining his light through my open window and he's frozen too, just staring at the baggie with this look on his face like really? I just started immediately professing I swear to God this is catnip, you can take it and smell it like I swear. And at this point it's just so ridiculous that I start cracking up, and the cop takes it and reasonably deduces I'm telling the truth, and he starts laughing and calls his partner over and tells her what happened, and they both just cackled away for a minute and sent us on our way. Long time ago I was working swing and got off work at 2:30 AM. It was payday and I'd take my check to the ATM to deposit it. I got pulled over for not having lights on my bicycle. Cop was having a really hard time buying that I was cashing my check at 3:30 AM, and riding around with a backpack and no lights. He eventually left, but I saw him pull into McDonald's across the street and watch me go to the ATM and put a check in it. He seemed perplexed. Wait, so it's not okay to drive a bicycle at night without lights? Unless you're on the way to deposit a check in an ATM, then no lights are okay? That kind of offense is a safety violation, and police don't necessarily cite you for it, just a warning. Especially if you look like you can't afford the extra equipment. In this case, the stop was more of a random kid riding a bike without being seen at an ungodly hour with a backpack full of stuff. Better make sure it's not related to the recent robbery I heard over the radio. He made sure it was legit before peacing out. I was the one with the excuse. Forgot my keys at friend's place before going out drinking that night. Get home at 2 AM, no keys. Only one of our windows didn't have ghetto bars, so I took the screen out and starting pushing/smacking it up. Locks were on the sides, only providing friction. As I'm halfway in, I just feel whomp. Got tackled into the house. The officer was still outside, holding on to my ankles. I look up and just said, I'm astonished by your response time. I actually live here, let me get up, unlock the door, and give you my ID. So I did, and he stares at it for a second, then says sorry and sprints off to look for the person they were actually in the area looking for. My dad once got woken up in the middle of the night by some noise on his first floor balcony of his then apartment, so he went to check it out to find a cop on his balcony and got scared shitless. Turns out his neighbor was hoarding parking tickets and whatnot. He refused to pay and this got so out of hand they had an arrest warrant for him. The cop on the balcony just miscounted and mistook my dad's balcony for his neighbor's. Evening officer. I couldn't help but notice you're breaking into my apartment. How can I assist? Not a cop, but this happened to my mom. A long time ago, my mom was driving home from work. She was swerving on the road and was eventually pulled over. The cops that pulled her over assumed she was drunk and decided to just dump her on her doorstep since the car was only right down the street from where she got picked up. At the time my brother was only 10, so needless to say, the cops left my mother with an 10-year-old. Her neighbor happened to see the cops drop her off and drive off. The neighbor just so happened to be a nurse at the local hospital. When she saw how my mother was left, she immediately called 911. The same cops came and made the claim that she was drunk and they didn't need to be there. It turned out that my mother was going in shock and was rushed to the hospital. Prior to this, my mother had gone to a chiropractor who had done an acupuncture procedure on her neck that caused damage to her nerves. She actually ended up in a coma for 2 weeks where when she did come out of the coma, she basically forgot everything. It took 3 years for her to make a, thankfully, full recovery. She still doesn't remember some things from her past, but I'm glad that someone was there for her when this happened. Me and a friend had the cops called on us for crawling in our friend's window. He was in the bathroom so he couldn't unlock the door, but the porch window happened to be unlocked, so we found our way in. As I was crawling in, I saw a car parked across the street with someone in it and remarked that it must look like we're breaking in. 5 minutes later I hear a knock at the door, open it and, upon seeing a police officer, yelled back into the house, "Hey, Jimmy, the cops are here." We explained the situation to the cop while we waited for our friend to get out of the bathroom, but I'm not sure he bought it even after Jimmy came out laughing. He gave Jimmy a serious look and asked, "Do you know these individuals? Like, why would someone be all calm and laughing if 2 strangers had broken into their house?" Former marechaussee here, look it up, it is a Dutch thing, police but also military. We also had jurisdiction over the American soldiers stationed here. One day we got called over to a possible case of domestic violence. We arrive at the house and the guy opened wearing only underwear. He told us he and his wife were role-playing. Of course we didn't trust this and asked to see his wife. After denying us entry, we told we would come back with a warrant. He reluctantly agreed to let us enter. So we go in and he opened the basement door and inside was the freakiest sex dungeon. I mean chains, whips, things I couldn't identify hanging on the wall. And in the middle hanging in Shen was his butt-naked, gagged wife. We asked her but she told everything was okay. Turned out they were really into some kinky stuff. Asked them to keep the screaming part in the basement and to a minimal. We did the whole thing with a straight face, but as soon as we were in the car, furious wanking ensued. An awesome end to the story. Not a cop, but one time in HS I ditched school and got pulled over for speeding. When asked what I was up to, I said returning this book, Harry Potter, to my grandma. But it was actually true. No ticket, he let me go. My department frequently had to deal with this male escort who kept getting released in work release programs. No joke, we caught this guy giving out hand jobs in broad daylight at stoplights. Anyways, I and a few co-workers leave town for a conference, and guess who we fucking find up to his old tricks? Outside of our jurisdiction, so we don't do anything about it besides report him, but we talked to him and he gave some bullshit excuse about how he was flown in on a private jet for some record deal. Yes, he had mentioned his hip-hop career to us earlier. No, I never got his SoundCloud link. Anyways, we sort of forget about him until we get to the Greyhound station and there he fucking is again up to his normal tricks. He obviously wanted to deflect the conversation from what he was doing, so he offered to give us a ride back to our city in his private jet. We detain him, but before we can even call the local station, a limo rolls up and the chauffeur walks around with a sign with his name on it. Dude was telling the truth about his record deal. We definitely upgraded our travel arrangements after apologizing for not believing him. Little shit still gives us regular trouble, of course. Was his album titled, Terry's South Bitch Live Fuck You Dad? No cops are posting in here anyway, so I'll throw my hat into the ring as a defense attorney. Guy pulled over for impaired driving and charged later with OE. My boss gets the criminal complaint and the guy shows up for his initial appearance and tells her he hadn't been drinking despite horrifically failing the sobriety test. She's literally sitting next to him and he's obviously waited again, Disappointing but not uncommon for alcoholics. The deputies arrest him for bail jumping because he drive himself to court that day, and while out on bail he's not supposed to drink. He adamantly denies drinking. Blood tests come back. He didn't drink. Dude's diabetic without knowing it and naturally got himself drunk because sometimes when it goes untreated, diabetes can cause symptoms that look just like intoxication. Got him some insulin and the charge is dismissed. I'm an ER nurse. When the cops bring their DUI folks to us for a quick blood draw, I always get a blood glucose too, just in case. AskReddit. Airway, breathing, circulation, don't ever forget glucose. This was my favorite story from my 4th grade teacher, not a cop. She went to a cousin's wedding in mid-July. The cousin had overestimated how much champagne they would need at the reception and was giving away bottles to anyone who was interested, so my teacher took 3 and put them in the back seat of her car. Again, this was a hot summer day in July. After saying their goodbyes, my teacher, her husband, and her parents piled into the car and pulled out onto the highway, where 2 bottles burst open, spraying champagne everywhere and causing quite a ruckus. Of course, while this was happening, the car was swerving as the driver was also getting bathed in sparkling champagne. So it came as no surprise that as soon as they collected themselves, they saw the familiar flashing lights of a state trooper and pulled over. According to my teacher, the first thing the cop said was, "I'm not gonna ask if you've been drinking because I can smell it from here." My teacher tried explaining what had happened, but the cop wouldn't hear of it and ordered everyone out of the car. That's when the cop saw that everyone, both drivers and passengers, were dressed in their finery, but soaked with champagne, and looking quite shaken. A cursory search showed the open bottles, but the cop still insisted on a quick sobriety check just to make sure. Not a cop, but when I was in university I went to a party and got totally loaded. I decided I shouldn't go to the bar and started walking home. En route, I remember specifically deciding I was too drunk, a cop was going to pick me up, and I should stay at my friends Brent and Scott's place. I walked through the front door, kicked off my shoes, yelled up the stairs that it was just me, I'd done this before, and crashed on the couch. Roughly an hour and a half later, maybe around 1:30 in the morning, I wake up in cuffs. I'm a really heavy sleeper, with alcohol in my system or not, so they were having a real tough time waking me. Finally I wake, realize I can't move my arms, and see 2 cops and a family of 4. Holy shit, what had happened? The family is just staring at me and the cops start demanding answers. Naturally, I'm like, is Brent here? The cops are not impressed. Finally, after about 20 minutes of them shouting at me, I kind of clue in. I asked them the date, it was May 1st. Their lease had literally expired the day before and the new tenants moved in. I explained and finally asked the cop if I could call them and prove it. They let me, and I had the cop ask him what his address was the day before Brent recited the same one I had been sleeping in. They still gave me a drunk in public ticket, but no trespassing ticket, and drove me home. I don't want to blame the family, but they should have locked their doors. If it was a college town, shit like that happens all the time. Late one night, there was a driver acting very suspiciously in an area known for drug deals, so I pulled him over and asked what he was doing there in the middle of the night. He stalled and stuttered a bit, and then told me that he was just waiting on his friend. I asked what his friend was doing, and after some more stalling, he told me she was going to bring him an alarm clock. It was pretty obvious he was making shit up as he went, but then another car passed us and pulled over in front of him. A woman got out carrying a Walmart bag, and inside was an alarm clock. I'm not a cop, but I saw this interaction on an episode of Live PD. I saw that one live. Friggin' hilarious when they pulled the alarm clock out of the bag, even though you could see through it. My dad was a cop and my favorite story of his goes like this: he's a young cop in a rough neighborhood. It's so late that the stoplights are flashing red, meaning treat it like a stop sign. Out of nowhere this pink caddy goes rolling through the intersection. My dad pulls him over. A big black dude was driving, the caddy had fur interior, dice in the mirror. A real pimp car if you know what I mean. My dad goes, "Sir, do you know you ran that light back there?" And this guy says, "Officer, I do believe I got between the flashes." My dad was laughing so hard he had to let the guy go. Is it possible for a post to get to the front page with nothing interesting in it? Let's find out.